They say Spotify saved the music industry, but when you press play, you probably don't realize you've just participated in a massive data experiment. Every song you listen to, every time you skip, every emotion you choose, it's all recorded, analyzed, and sold. Meanwhile, the artists who create the music you love receive less than 1 cent for each listen. Spotify claims to bring music to everyone, but behind that promise lies a system fueled by exploitation and emotional manipulation. In this report, we will uncover the secrets within the world's most powerful digital music empire, how Spotify is secretly changing global music tastes, and why millions are leaving the platform once considered the savior of music. To survive, Spotify had to make a deal with the devil. That seemingly metaphorical statement is, in fact, the very essence of the largest digital music empire on the planet. In 2008, Spotify needed only one thing to survive: the right to legally stream music. But that power lies in the hands of three giants: Universal Music Group, Sony Music, and Warner Music. These three corporations control over 70% of the world's music library, meaning without them, there would be no Spotify. And in exchange for the key to global music, Spotify had to give them 70% of its revenue, along with shares in the company itself. A deal that investors later called an expensive handshake. Imagine, you open a coffee shop, but to sell coffee, you have to split 7 parts of the profit with the bean grower, keeping only 3 parts to pay employees, rent the space, and maintain the shop. Will you be able to survive? Spotify accepts. Not out of greed, but because if they didn't sign, they would be wiped off the musical map before they even got off the ground. From then on, Spotify's business model became a perfect paradox. The more people listened, the more money they lost. Revenue increased, but 70% was immediately taken out to pay the record label. Only the remaining 30% is used for operations, investment, marketing, and survival. Consequence? The artist, the one who directly creates the music, is almost forgotten in the value chain. Each time you listen, even if you replay it 100 times, it only earns the creator 0.04 USD. That means a cheap cup of coffee is worth nearly 1,000 music streams. A song needs to reach 567,000 streams per month for the artist to achieve a basic income. Can you imagine that number? This means that if a musician isn't in the top 1% on Spotify, they're essentially working for free. Spotify once promised to save music from piracy. And yes, they did it. But in the process of saving the industry, they crushed the very people who created the music. Record labels, once trembling at the thought of Napster and LimeWire, are now back stronger than ever, using Spotify as their new money-making weapon. They invested in the platform, received shares, and then continued to force artists to sign suffocating contracts. Spotify became a blood bridge, where record labels and artists crossed, but only one side benefited. Spotify helps me listen, but it doesn't help me live. An indie artist shared 20,000 listens, only earned 7 USD. I burst out laughing, but I wanted to cry. This is the circle Spotify can't escape. Without major label music, they lose listeners. If they continue to be dependent, they cannot pay artists fairly. If user fees are increased, the audience will leave. A triangle of alarm has kept Spotify from profitability, despite having over 600 million users. Financial experts call this the hostage business model. Spotify is a hostage to its own partners, the companies that hold the platform's vital decisions. At the same time, the company spent hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire exclusive podcast rights for shows like Joe Rogan, Obama, and DC Comics. Those high-profile deals angered many artists. Spotify was willing to pay $100 million to a talker, but only a few cents to a songwriter. That contradiction made Spotify a symbol of injustice in the creative world. A platform born to help artists survive is now seen as a data factory that sucks the life out of art. Many analysts don't see Spotify as the villain, but rather as the smartest victim in a cruel game. A technology platform caught between the ambition of the financial industry and the greed of the entertainment industry. It didn't choose to be evil. It was forced to adapt to survive. If Spotify doesn't play by the rules, they won't survive. But if it continues, music will take their place. That question has now become a tragedy for the entire industry. What would you think if you knew that every time you listen to music, the artist you love received less than 1/1000th of a dollar? Is Spotify to blame or to be pitied? And in this game, who is the true conductor of global music? Spotify thought technology alone was enough to win, but in the game of data and emotions, the true power isn't with the DJ, but with the person who controls the world's listening tastes. Spotify once boasted that they empower listeners to choose the music they love, but today listeners no longer choose the music. It's chosen for them. According to internal data, over 35% of global streams on Spotify do not come from personal searches, but from automated playlists curated by the system. Names that seem random, like Discover Weekly, Rap Caviar, Chill Hits, are actually global data tools. Every time you press next, every time you stop at a piece of music longer than 30 seconds, it's all analyzed, scored, stored, and reused. Spotify not only knows what kind of music you like, but also when you're sad, when you're lonely, and even which songs keep you listening the longest. That's no longer listening to music. It was a global emotional experiment with over 500 million people surveyed. If you pay attention, you'll notice that Spotify's algorithm doesn't just recommend, it trains users' musical tastes. And in the process, it learned one thing. True emotions are not highly profitable, while catchy melodies are. The result is that modern music is being reprogrammed. Musicians call this the skip rate. If more than 20% of listeners skip a song before 30 seconds, it almost disappears from the recommendation system. This means that a song with a long intro or slow tempo will be penalized by the algorithm itself. Artists are forced to write music that gets straight to the point, introducing the chorus from the 10-second mark, with no intro or experimentation. Music, once the language of the soul, has now become content optimized for user attention span. You don't need to make people love the song, just don't make them turn it off. A producer said something like that, half in jest, half seriously. When you listen to the Chill Vibes playlist, you probably think it's a random selection. But in reality, Spotify is actively pushing low copyright music to the top of the list. According to an investigation by Music Business Worldwide, hundreds of virtual artists with no biography, no image, and no social media presence have appeared on top playlists. Some have over 500 million listens. Even this, no one knows who they are. These songs are from Epidemic Sound, a royalty-free music library whose rights Spotify purchased for full use. The more people who listen, the more Spotify saves millions of dollars in royalties for real artists. And the interesting, or perhaps frightening thing, is that one of Spotify's early investors also holds shares in Epidemic Sound. A perfect circle, a self-selected music system, self-owned content, and self-benefiting. If music was once an art form, it is now a data supply chain, programmed for profit. Over the past decade, the emergence of AI music has blurred the lines between humans and machines. Spotify once experimented with AI-generated tracks that were perfectly composed to the point of being cold. Music that doesn't need musicians, doesn't need emotion, doesn't need royalties, but can be played millions of times. From a financial perspective, this is a dream come true in terms of profitability. But from an artistic perspective, that's a disaster for the soul of music. An independent producer shared, "We are no longer competing with other artists. We are competing with computers, which never get tired, have no emotions, and don't need to be paid." Spotify doesn't just record listening habits. They sell emotional data. Brands can target ads based on your listening mood. If you listen to a sad piano playlist, you'll see ads for calming drinks. If you listen to morning motivation, you'll hear ads for coffee or the gym. Music, a means of healing, has now become a tool for predicting consumer behavior. It's no longer written to move people, but to keep them engaged longer. So where do the listeners fit into this game? The listener, once the center, is now data. They think they're being suggested songs that match their mood, but in reality, that mood is being shaped in reverse. Spotify knows what I like, but I don't want it to know. One user wrote in the comments section and received over 10,000 likes. That saying is the perfect summary of this era. We are listening to music through algorithms, not with our hearts anymore. What would you think if you knew that over a third of the songs you listen to every day are chosen for you by algorithms. Do you still believe your musical taste is genuine? Or is it just the result of lines of code written to keep you engaged for another 5 minutes? When music is manipulated, listeners lose their right to choose. But when trust is manipulated, the whole foundation collapses. Let's see what made millions of people leave Spotify. Not just for the music, but because they no longer recognize themselves in it. Spotify was once hailed as a symbol of the future of music, fast, convenient, and globally connected. But 15 years later, that empire is crumbling. It's not because of technology, but because of something more intangible: trust. Users are starting to leave. The artists stopped releasing. Revenue is still increasing, but loyalty, once the glue of the brand, is eroding. According to data from Statista, in the last 12 months alone, Spotify lost over 2.3 million paid subscribers in Europe, and the percentage of users switching to other platforms increased by over 18%. Each small unsubscribe, but together they are the cracks in an empire that once dominated. A longtime user shared, "We're not leaving Spotify for the music, but because of the feeling of being controlled. The experience is getting worse. Users feel exploited. Spotify used to be the home of music, but now it's more like a shopping mall for advertisements. Free users hear 4 to 6 ads every 15 minutes. Familiar features like offline listening, song selection, skipping, etc. are all locked behind a paywall. And the algorithm, once your best friend who understood you the most, has now become the controller of your emotions. The feeling of being able to listen to my own mind disappeared. Spotify now feels like a machine optimizing listening time, not the listening experience." A survey on Reddit showed that 64% of users feel Spotify is no longer as enjoyable as before. They don't discover new music, but only stick to system-arranged playlists. An old user shared, "I turned on Spotify, but I couldn't remember any of my favorite songs. Everything sounds the same. It's like someone is programming my emotions." What about the artists? They increasingly see Spotify as an unfair playing field. On average, 1 million listens are equivalent to $4,000 USD, a figure before deducting agency fees. Meanwhile, Spotify spent $0 million on an exclusive podcast deal, a disparity that leads many to call Spotify the empire of artistic injustice. Taylor Swift, the Beatles, Metallica, Pink Floyd, names that were once iconic, all had times when they removed their music from the platform. It's not because they lack money, but because they've lost faith that their music is still appreciated. An indie artist once wrote, "Spotify gave me a global audience, but it also made my music lose its soul." When everything is just data, art is no longer art. And perhaps you understand to some extent that the collapse of trust comes not only from listeners and artists, but also from within the system itself. Spotify was once found to be using fake artists in hundreds of official playlists. The songs were created by a hired band, released under dozens of fake names, to avoid paying royalties to the real artist. Worse, CEO Daniel Ek was previously criticized for investing over 100 million euros in a military technology development company. It's not legally wrong, but it's emotionally wrong. With a foundation built on artists and audiences, that action was seen as the first moral crack. One artist responded, "Our money, our trust, is being used for something that is the opposite of music." From 2015 to the present, Spotify has consistently reported losses, totaling over $3.5 billion, despite a 5-fold increase in revenue. They reacted by cutting costs, laying off staff, investing in AI, and increasing the price of premium packages. But the more optimized, the further away from the community. Stock psychology first, artists later, caused Spotify to lose its original identity. The company, once hailed as a music hero, is now labeled a data giant. In Sweden, the home of Spotify, a social survey shows that 57% of young people believe Spotify is no longer a music company. For them, Spotify is now an audio-disguised advertising platform. When trust collapses, something unexpected happens. Users begin to seek the truth, even if it's inconvenient. They're returning to CDs, vinyl records, or transparent platforms like Bandcamp, where listeners pay artists directly. The online community calls this movement back to ownership. An interesting statistic, Vinyl sales in the US in 2024 increased by 11%, surpassing CD sales for the first time since 1987. When technology goes too far, people return to the most rustic thing, real sound. Everything Spotify is going through started with a good idea. But like many other data empires, they forgot one simple thing. Music isn't just a product, it's a belief. When users feel exploited, artists feel replaced, and the company only talks about numbers, that empire collapses not because of financial failure, but because of a loss of human connection. Try to remember, what song made you cry the last time? And where does it come from? The heart of an artist or a playlist arranged by an algorithm? Can technology sustain music without making it lose its soul? When everything is optimized by data, is there any room left for genuine emotion? And if music, the most beautiful thing humanity has to offer, can be manipulated, what else can we believe in? When music collapses, it's not just Spotify that collapses, it's the world losing its ability to listen. But sometimes a breakdown is necessary for people to relearn how to listen with their hearts. Night, someone opens Spotify, the deep focus playlist plays, but after just a few minutes, our user stopped. It's not because the song is bad, but because everything sounds the same. Then he decided to get up and find the dusty old CD in the cabinet. The music wasn't perfect, a little scratchy, a little grainy, but it had a human touch. A small moment, but for millions around the world, it was an awakening. After more than a decade of living in the era of perfect sound, listeners are beginning to realize music has lost its soul. Once a symbol of music listening freedom, Spotify has now become an emotional firewall. Every song is optimized for the first 30 seconds, not to move you, but to keep you hooked. Musicians are forced to write music for data, while listeners are trapped in an inescapable playlist loop. According to the Music Industry Report 2024, 83% of Spotify users listen to the same 50 songs each week, and less than 7% discover new artists. Listening to music, something that was once a journey of self-discovery, is now just an unconscious habit. A comment shared tens of thousands of times I realized I wasn't listening to music because I loved it anymore, but because it was playing in the background of my life. Spotify has helped the world connect through sound, but in the process, it has made us lose the ability to listen. Let's look at the financial picture. Spotify has over 600 million users, over 100 million songs, and billions of streams every day. But behind that impressive number lies a paradox. The more popular the music, the more diluted the emotion. A 2023 internal report shows that AI-generated songs grew by over 400% in 2 years. Over 30% of popular playlists contain music that doesn't belong to any real artist. That was the moment when the boundary between humans and machines blurred. A song that no longer needs musicians, just data about your listening preferences. A virtual artist doesn't need an audience, just algorithmic confirmation. And when music becomes a product of computers, it ceases to be the voice of the heart. In 2025, the Back to Real Music movement spread across Europe and North America. Millions of people share images of themselves listening to vinyl records, buying CDs, or manually downloading music. It's not about nostalgia, it's about wanting to regain control of my emotions. In the US, vinyl sales increased by 11% in 2024, surpassing CD sales for the first time since 1987. In Japan, over 40% of young people are willing to pay extra for hand-picked copyrighted music instead of streaming. Spotify, the company that once ushered in the era of unlimited music listening, is now facing a wave of intentional departures. They didn't leave because they hated the platform. They left because they wanted to hear the real sound again. Spotify didn't crash because of the music. It collapsed because it lost empathy. The founders once believed technology could save music from piracy. But the more they optimize it, the more they turn it into a commodity. When music is reduced to content, listeners become data and artists become input. That's the cycle that all major tech companies face. Facebook once promised to connect the world and then turned into an advertising machine. TikTok promises to help you be creative, but programs the attention of an entire generation. And Spotify promises to liberate music, but is taking away the true listening experience. Ask yourself, do you really choose the songs you listen to every day, or does Spotify choose for you? Are you listening to music or just hearing your own echo in the data? And if emotions can be programmed, are humans still free? Stop. Close the application. Play that old song again, the one you loved before Spotify existed. Listen with your heart, not with algorithms. When the last note of music faded away, what remained was not emptiness. That's true silence, something Spotify can't measure. In that silence, people began to realize Spotify wasn't failing because of technology. It failed because it lost its soul. And perhaps to find true music again, we must turn off Spotify. From the echoes of Spotify, a new era is taking shape, where music returns to the people and technology is forced to serve emotions rather than manipulate them. But the question that remains unanswered is, are we truly awake when the music of the future is being created by artificial intelligence? When was the last time you heard a song that gave you goosebumps? Are you listening to music, or are you listening to suggested data? If the algorithm understands your emotions better than you do, are you still in control, or are you just being controlled? Please share your feelings in the comments section below. If you feel this video made you think differently about music, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so we can continue our journey of exploring the hidden corners of the world of technology, art, and people together. The content in this video is compiled from public sources, financial reports, industry analysis, and independent perspectives. The views presented are for informational and educational purposes only and are not intended to attack, accuse, or represent any organization or individual. All facts are cross-referenced to ensure neutrality and transparency. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. See you in the next videos.